romance, Iliad. I'm really happy that you could join me today for this special episode from Homer's timeless epic Iliad as translated by Stanley Lombardo. I feel the need, I feel compelled, impelled, and other impulsed, incentivized in other ways to especially this episode start off by saying this production is definitely in no way endorsed by Hackett Publishing or Stanley Lombardo. They are not affiliated with it. They simply have given me permission to do this, and what I'm going to tell you in this episode is by no means reflective of them, their standards, character, or morals, or other things which a lot of people may term in this volatile time as values. So with that, I think it's just important to remind everybody that this show, it ain't for kids. This show ain't for children, alright? You got plenty of time for an episode like this when you're older. Now, in case any of you are shocked by the definite tonal shift that we enjoy here, typically on the show, I just want to remind you that everything you know about Greece, all those ancient statues, I just want to take your mind a little further this time and ask you, do you really think that a bunch of people who just were rolling around in their vineyards and making statues of naked people were all totally what we might call in this more, I guess, laxing and wholesomeness time, wholesome? Perhaps even conservative or wholesome? Well, I got news for you. I may not be a professor, but I know a thing or two about the Greeks. So with that, I think it's good for us to get right on into this episode, because that's the whole point. So if you'll remember correctly, if those more astute among you in the audience know how to count, this is in fact episode 14 now. Normally I would tell you that 14, those who know me best know that 14 is my unlucky number because of a game of pool I played where there were all the balls on the table, the pool balls, though your mind can go there, that's spelled. And the number 14 was missing. The 14 ball with that loathsome green stripe just wasn't available, and so we couldn't play a real fair game, and I lost because I was playing solids. That's why 14's my unlucky number, but as luck would have it, 14 is not going to be the unlucky number for everybody in this story for our nice episode. So I hope you're cozy down, you have something nice and nice to drink to cool yourself off in this special episode of this week. I'm using this special mug that was given to me by my mother, so I guess I didn't think that one through when I thought about how I was opening this episode. But yeah, let's just go with it, everybody. So this, without much more stalling, is Iliad, chapter 14. You'll remember that, where were we? We were on the beaches, and the Trojans were clambering over the wall, and the violence was erupting higher and higher, and Zeus was favoring the Trojans. Hector was charging ahead, but let's see if the tide may turn, or I don't know, something. I gotta take these off so I can read. Let's go. Iliad chapter 14. Nestor, drinking wine with Machaon, could not help but hear the screaming, and said, "Son of Asclepius, what do you make of this? Our boys are shouting much louder by the ships. Now don't get up. Just keep sipping that wine until pretty Hecamede heats up a warm bath and washes off all that clotted blood. Myself, I'll go to a lookout point now." With that, he picked up a metal-plated shield, one of Thrasymmedes, that was lying in the hut, and a heavy spear with a honed bronze point. He stepped outside and saw an ugly scene. The Greeks in rout, and behind them the high-hearted Trojans pouring through the wall. As the dark sea broods with a silent swell, and only a faint premonition of wind is traced on its surface, and no crest forms until a decisive breeze comes down from Zeus. So the old man pondered which way to go. To join the Greek troops, or to get Agamemnon, the son of Atreus, shepherd of his people. He thought it over and went for Agamemnon. The fighting continued, and the killing. Armor rang under sword blades, and spear points nosed busily past plated shields. The wounded kings were coming up from their ships, Diomedes, Odysseus, and Agamemnon, and met Nestor on the way. Their ships were drawn up far from the battle, on the sand by the gray sea, in the first row, and the wall was built near the last row inland. The beach was wide, but could not hold all the ships, so they were drawn up in rows toward the plain, and filled the space between the two headlands. So the kings were coming up together, leaning on their spears to see the fighting, and their hearts were grieved. Old Nestor met them, and was hailed by Agamemnon. "Nestor, son of Neleus, glory of our army, why have you left the battle and come here? I fear that Hector will make good on the threats he leveled against us in the Trojan muster, that he would not return to Iliad until he had burnt our ships and killed our men. It's all coming true, just as he said. And the worst part is that all of the Greeks are angry with me, just like Achilles. None of them is willing to defend our ships." And Nestor, the Durranian horseman, answered, "Yes, this is how things are, and Zeus himself, the Thunder Lord, could not make them otherwise. For the wall is down. We put our trust in it as a bulwark for our ships, and now the enemy is at our ships, fighting relentlessly. You cannot even tell in which direction our men are retreating. So confused is their slaughter, the air so filled with the noise of battle, up to the sky. We must take counsel in this situation. Not enter the battle ourselves. It is not possible for wounded men to fight." And Agamemnon the warlord, "Well then, Nestor, the ships are under attack, and neither the wall nor the trench, which we trusted to be a bulwark for our beachhead camp, has been of any avail. It must be the pleasure of Zeus Almighty for us to die here, nameless and far from Argos. I knew it when he was favoring the Greeks, and I know now that he is giving the Trojans glory from above and has tied our hands. So this is what I say we should all do now. Let's haul the first line of ships to the water, get them afloat, and moor them with anchors until darkness comes. If and when the Trojans stop for the night, we can drag down the rest. It is no shame to flee ruin, even by night. Better to give evil the slip than be caught by it." Odysseus looked him up and down and said, "What kind of a thing is that to say? You're a ruined man, son of Atreus, fit to command some ragtag army, but not to rule over men like us, to whom Zeus has granted just one thing in life, to wind up wars like skeins of wool from youth to old age until the last of us dies. Do you really want to leave Troy behind? The great city that we've suffered so much for? Stop that talk before somebody hears you. Words like that should never make it past your mouth. You're a sceptered king, commanding the loyalty of an army of Greeks. You must have lost your mind, ordering us to launch ships while the battle is raging. The Trojans, who are winning as it is, will have all their prayers answered, and our army will be utterly crushed. Draw the ships to the sea, and the Greeks will be looking over their shoulders and give up the fight. Your plan will ruin us, Lord Agamemnon." To which Agamemnon briefly replied, "That cuts deep, Odysseus. I'm not suggesting that the ships be launched against the Achaeans' will. I wish there were someone, young or old, with a better plan than mine. I would welcome that." Diomedes, the bull roarer, had a response. "The man is here. No need for a long search. If you are willing to listen, and if none of you will be upset because I am the youngest in years. There's nothing wrong with my lineage. My father was Tydeus, who lies buried at Thebes. My great-grandfather, Portheus, had 3 peerless sons who lived in Pleuron and steep Calydon, Agrius, Melas, and the horseman Oeneus. My father's father, the bravest of the 3, my father left home and wandered to Argos, as Zeus and the other gods no doubt willed. He married one of Adrastus' daughters and lived in a rich house with many acres in wheat and orchards, and many sheep, and he was the best spearman in all Argos. You will have heard of all this and know it is true. So don't think I'm a coward by birth or reject anything worthwhile I might have to say. We must go down to the battle, injuries and all, not to fight. We will stay out of range to avoid taking wounds on top of wounds, but to spur the others on and send them in. Those who have been on the sidelines nursing their resentment and failing to fight. They heard him out and agreed. Agamemnon led the way as they started out. Poseidon was not blind to any of this, but went with them disguised as an old man. He took Agamemnon by his right hand and spoke to him words that winged home. "Well, son of Atreus, Achilles' dark heart must be laughing now, as he sees the panic and slaughter of the Greeks. The man hasn't a shred of sense left, none. Damn him! May some god cripple him. The blessed ones aren't angry with you. Not yet. There's still a chance you will see the Trojan generals raise dust on the wide plain as they beat a retreat from your ships and huts." And as he sped over the plain, Poseidon yelled so loud it seemed that 10,000 warriors had been enlisted by Ares and shouted at once. And the god's yell put into each Greek's heart the strength to fight and battle on without pause. Standing on a crag of Olympus, gold-throned Hera saw her brother, who was her husband's brother too, busy on the fields of human glory, and her heart sang. Then she saw Zeus sitting on the topmost peak of Ida, and was filled with resentment. Cow-eyed Hera mused for a while on how to trick the mind of Zeus, Aegis holder, and the plan that seemed best to her was to make herself up and go to Ida, seduce him, and then shed on his eyelids and cunning mind a sleep gentle and warm. She went to the bedroom her darling son Hephaestus had built for her, and closed behind her the solid polished doors he had fitted out with a secret latch, and that no other god could open. First she cleansed her lovely skin with ambrosia, then rubbed on scented oil so immortally perfumed that if the jar were just shaken in Zeus's bronze-floored house, the fragrance would spread to heaven and earth. She rubbed this into her beautiful skin, and she combed her hair and plaited the lustrous ambrosial locks that fell gorgeously from her immortal head. Then she put on a robe that Athena had embroidered for her, pinning it at her breast with brooches of gold. A sash with 100 tassels circled her waist, and in her pierced ears she hung earrings with 3 mulberry drops, beguilingly bright. And the shining goddess veiled over everything with a beautiful veil that was as white as the sun, and bound lovely sandals on her oiled, supple feet. When everything was perfect, she stepped out of her room and called Aphrodite, and had a word with her in private. "My dear child, will you do something for me, I wonder, or will you refuse, angry because I favor the Greeks and you the Trojans?" And Zeus's daughter Aphrodite replied, "Goddess revered as Cronos' daughter, speak your mind, tell me what you want, and I'll oblige you, if I possibly can." And Hera, with every intention to deceive, Give me now the sex and desire you used to subdue immortals and humans. I'm off to visit the ends of the earth and Father Ocean and Mother Tithes, who nursed and doted on me in their house when they got me from Rhea after Zeus had exiled Kronos to the regions below. I'm going to see them and try to resolve their endless quarrel. For eons now they've been angry and haven't made love. If I can talk to them and have them make up and get them together in bed again, they will worship the ground I walk on. And Aphrodite, who loved to smile, how could I, or would I, refuse someone who sleeps in the arms of Almighty Zeus? And with that, she unbound from her breast an ornate sash inlaid with magical charms. Sex is in it, and desire, and seductive sweet talk that fools even the wise. She handed it to Hera and said, "Here, put this sash in your bosom. It has everything built in. I predict you will accomplish what your heart desires." She spoke, and ox-eyed Hera, smiling, tucked the sash in her bosom. Then Zeus's daughter Aphrodite went home, but Hera streaked down from Olympus' peak, used Pieria and Amathia as stepping stones, and sped over the snow-capped mountains of Thrace. Her feet never touched earth. At Athos she stepped on the billowing sea, and so came to Lemnos, Thoas' city, where she met Sleep, the brother of Death. She took Sleep's hand and said to him, "Sleep, Lord of all, mortal and immortal, if ever you've listened to me before, listen now, and I will be grateful forever. Lull Zeus's bright eyes to sleep for me as soon as I lie beside him in love. I will give you gifts. A handsome throne of imperishable gold that Hephaestus, my strong-armed son, will build you. It comes with a stool to rest your feet on, as you sit at banquet and sip your wine." Sweet Sleep answered her, "Goddess revered as Kronos' daughter, if there were any other of the gods eternal, I'd lull him to sleep without any trouble, even if it were the river Ocean, which was the origin of them all. But not Zeus. I wouldn't go near the son of Kronos, much less lull him to sleep, unless he himself asked me. I learned my lesson from your last request. That day Heracles, Zeus's high-hearted son, sailed from Troy, having wasted the city. Yes, I slipped my sweet self around the mind of Zeus Aegis Holder, while you brewed up storms at sea to drive his son Heracles off course to coast far from his friends. And when Zeus woke up, he was angry, throwing gods all over the house and looking for me especially. He would have pitched me from ether to sea, no more to be seen, if Night, the mistress, had not saved me. I ran to her and she relented, reluctant to do anything to offend swift Night. And now this, another impossible mission." Hera, the ox-eyed lady, said to him, "Sleep, what are you worried about? Do you think that Zeus will help the Trojans and be as angry now as he was then for Heracles, his own son? Come on, look, I'll give you one of the young Graces to have and to hold and be called your wife. Pasithea, the object of all your desire." Sleep's mood brightened at this. He said, "Swear by the inviolable water of Styx, one hand on fertile earth and the other on glistening sea, so that all the gods below with Kronos will be witnesses that you will give me one of the graces, Pasithea, the object of all my desire. The white-armed goddess Hera agreed and swore the oath, naming all the gods in Tartarus below. Titans, they are called. When she had sworn and finished the oath, the two of them left Lemnos and Imbros and came like swirling fog to Ida, a mountain wilderness dotted with springs. They left the sea at Lecton and headed inland. The treetops quivered under their feet. Sleep halted before Zeus could see him, perching in the highest fir tree on Ida that rose through the mist to pure bright air. Sleep nestled in its long-needled branches and looked just like the shrill mountain owl gods call Chalkis and men call Simindis. Hera was fast approaching Gargarus, Ida's highest peak, when Zeus saw her. And when he saw her, lust enveloped him, just as it had the first time they made love, slipping off to bed behind their parents' backs. He stood close to her and said, "Hera, why have you left Olympus, and where are your horses and chariot?" And Hera, with every intention to deceive, "I'm off to visit the ends of the earth, and Father Ocean and Mother Tethys, who nursed and doted on me in their house. I'm going to see them and try to resolve their endless quarrel. For eons now, they've been angry and haven't made love. My horses stand at the foot of Ida, ready to bear me over land and sea. I came here from Olympus for your sake, so you wouldn't be upset that I left to visit Ocean without a word to you." And Zeus, clouds scuttling about him, "You can go there later just as well. Let's get in bed now and make love. No goddess or woman has ever made me feel so overwhelmed with lust, not even when I fell for Ixion's wife, who bore Perithous, wise as a god, or Danae, with lovely slim ankles, who bore Perseus, a paragon of men, or the daughter of far-famed Phoenix, who bore Minos and godlike Rhadamanthus, or Semele or Alcmene in Thebes, who bore Heracles, a stout-hearted son, and Semele bore Dionysus, a joy to humans, or Demeter, the fair-haired queen, or glorious Leto, or even you. I've never loved anyone as I love you now, never been in the grip of desire so sweet." And Hera, with every intention to deceive, "What a thing to say, my awesome lord. The thought of us lying down here on Ida and making love outdoors in broad daylight. What if one of the immortals saw us asleep and went to tell the other gods and told them? I could never get up and go back home. It would be shameful. But if you really want to do this, there is the bedroom your dear son Hephaestus built for you, with good solid doors. Let's go there and lie down, since you're in the mood." And Zeus, who masses the clouds, replied, "Hera, don't worry about any god or man seeing us. I'll enfold you in a cloud so dense and golden not even Helios could spy on us, and his light is the sharpest vision there is." With that, he caught his wife in his arms. Beneath them, the shining soil sprouted fresh grass and dewy lotus and crocus and hyacinth, soft and thick, that kept them up off the ground. And as they lay there, a beautiful golden cloud enfolded them and precipitated drops of glimmering dew. And so the father slept soundly on Gargarun's peak, mastered by sleep and love, and held his wife close. But sweet sleep ran down to the Achaean ships with a message for Poseidon, the earth-shaker. He stood close to him, and his words winged home. Help the Greeks all you want now, Poseidon, and give them their glory, however brief, while Zeus still sleeps. For Hera has bedded him, and I have wrapped them in a downy slumber. Saying this, sleep went off to the human world, leaving Poseidon more determined than ever to aid the Greeks. He sprang to the front and cried, Achaeans, are we going to concede victory to Hector so he can take our ships and claim the glory? That's how he's talking now that Achilles is nursing his wrath on the beach by his hulls. But he won't miss him too much if the rest of us all pull together and help each other. Now here's what I want us all to do. Get the biggest and best shields in the army, strap on full metal helmets, arm yourselves with the longest spears you can find, and let's move out. You have my word that Hector, no matter how eager he is, won't hold his ground. Now let's go and exchange gear if you have to, so that our best fighters have the biggest shields. He spoke. They listened, and they did as he said, and the kings, the wounded, Diomedes, Odysseus, and Agamemnon, marshaled them, going through the ranks and switching armor, so that the best men were using the best gear. When their bodies were covered with burnished bronze, they moved out, led by Poseidon, who held in his clenched fist a terrible sword, its long edge like lightning, a weapon outlawed in mortal combat, sheer terror for men. Opposite him, Hector marshaled the Trojans, and the two of them tightened the cords of war, Poseidon tossing his dark blue mane and Hector standing in a cone of cold light, while the sea surged up to the Greek ships and huts. The two sides closed with a pulsating roar, the pounding of surf when arching breakers roll in from the deep under painful northern winds, or the hissing roar of a forest fire when it climbs the hills to burn all the woods, or the howling of wind when it is angry with oaks and moans and shrieks through their leafy branches, will give you some idea of the uncanny noise the Greeks and Trojans made when they clashed. Hector struck first, a spear cast at Ajax, who was in his line of fire. He didn't miss, but the spear hit Ajax where his two belts, one for his shield and one for his silver-studded sword, formed a protective cross over his skin. Angry that he had made a good throw for nothing, Hector backstepped into the ranks of his army, avoiding fate. But as he withdrew, big Ajax picked up one of the stones that had rolled underfoot. There were many of these, used as chalks for the ships, and caught Hector on the chest, above his shield's rim, just under the neck, and sent him spinning like a top. He fell as a tree falls, an oak tree blasted by lightning from Zeus. The tree is uprooted, and the air reeks of brimstone, and no one who sees this from close up has any desire to be near Zeus's thunderbolts ever again. So Hector fell to the ground in the dust. The spear was knocked from his hand, but his shield and helmet flew up in the air and then came down clattering on the rest of his embellished armor. The Greeks ran up screaming with delight, hurling javelins thick and fast, and hoping to drag him off, but they couldn't touch him. All Troy's best crowded around their hero. Polydamas, Aeneas, Agenor, Glaucus, Sarpedon, the Lycian commander. No one neglected Hector. They circled him with shields and lifted him up and away from war's toil until they brought him to the rear of the battle where his horses stood with his charioteer and rig, which took him groaning back toward the city. But when they reached the ford of Xanthus, the beautiful swirling river that Zeus begot, they lifted him from the chariot to the ground and poured water on him. This brought him around. His eyes opened, and kneeling on his knees, he vomited up a cloud of black blood. Then he sank back to the ground, and darkness covered his eyes. The blows still mastered his spirit. When the Greeks saw that Hector was gone, they remembered how much they loved to fight. First to draw blow was Oilean Ajax. A quick leap and thrust of his spear brought down Satnius, son of Enops, and a peerless naiad who lived in the river of Satnioasis, where he tended his flocks. When Ajax's spear hit him on the flank, he fell on his back and became the center of some hard fighting. Polydamas, Panthus' son, came up to help him and put his spear through the right shoulder of Prothenor, Areolicus' son. The spear's weight carried it clear through, and he fell on the earth clawing at the dust. Polydamas gloated over him loudly. "Ha! Another great throw from the strong hand of the heroic son of Panthus, and another Greek has my spear in his flesh. Use it as a crutch on your way down to hell." This boast pained the Greeks, no one more so than Telamonian Ajax, who was closest to the man when he fell. Ajax's bright spear was in the air instantly, hurling at Polydamas, who managed to dodge both its point and his death. No matter, the spear lodged in Archelicus, Antenor's son, whom the gods wanted to die, just where the neck splices into the spine. At the topmost vertebrae, the spear blade sheared through the double tendon. His mouth and nose hit the earth before his legs and knees. It was Ajax's turn to call to Polydamas. "What do you think, Polydamas? Was this man worthy to be killed in return for Prothenor? He wasn't simply a nobody, was he? Looks like he might be Antenor's brother, or his son. There's a family resemblance." He knew perfectly well who it was. The Trojans felt their chests tighten. Then Acamas, straddling his brother's body, stitched his spear through Promachus, the Boeotian, who was trying to drag the corpse by its feet into the clear. Acamas was exultant. "Try fighting sometime instead of issuing threats. We're not going to be the only side to suffer. We're going to give as good as we get. How do you like the nap Promachus is taking, courtesy of my spear? I didn't waste any time collecting the price for my brother's blood. That's what family is for, to beat off ruin." The Greeks winced when they heard this, no one more so than the warrior Peneleos. He charged, and when Acamas did not wait for his onslaught, he hit Ilioneus instead. This man's father was Phorbas, whom Hermes loved more than any other Trojan, and who had flocks and wealth to prove it. But only one child, Ilioneus. Peneleos' spear went through his eye socket, gouging out the eyeball and going clear through the nape of the neck. Ilioneus stretched out his hands. As he settled slowly to earth, Peneleos took out his sword and hacked at his neck, severing his head, helmet and all. The great spear was still stuck in the eye socket. Peneleos held it up like a poppy, and showing it to the Trojans, said, "Kindly take word to Ilioneus' parents to lament their prince in his family's halls, as the wife of Promachus, Alegenor's son, will lament the absence of her cherished husband when the Greeks return on their ships from Troy." He spoke, and the Trojans began to tremble, eyes searching for an escape from death. Muses who dwell on Olympus, tell me, who was the first Greek to bear away spoils once Poseidon had turned the battle's tide? Telamonian Ajax, who wounded Hyrtius, son of Gertius, leader of Mysians. And Antilochus despoiled Phalces and Murmurus, and Meriones slew Mores and Hippotion, and Toker stripped Prothoon and Periphetes, and the son of Atreus wounded Hyperenor in the flank, and when the bronze clove through, all the bowels spilled out, and his soul rushed through the gaping wound, and night covered his eyes. But Ajax, Oileus' swift son, killed the most. No one could chase down men in a rout faster than he, when Zeus makes them panic. And that was book 14 of Iliad, our special sexy episode. I hope you liked that. Anyway, so yeah, let's get into this one a little bit. So, one of the things that I think is so interesting about this battle is that Hector kind of has a flawed plan. I'm going to talk strategy before we get into all the stuff you came here for. So Hector wants to kill all the Greeks. He wants to kill them and burn all their ships and protect his city. That kind of makes sense, except here's the thing. When you put your soldiers or your enemy into a place from where there is no retreat, they will prefer death to flight. All right, that's something that we know from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. So what do I mean exactly? What does that mean? Well, the Greeks have nowhere to go. They don't have, as Agamemnon points out, Agamemnon's, let's get out of here, and Odysseus is like, there's no time to get out of here, man. Like, there's no time to get out of here, man. That's what Odysseus said. And so Agamemnon's like, let's get the boats out. He's like, we can't get the boats out. We can't get the boats out. And so what they end up doing is the Greeks just go savage, all right? That happens in real life. So let's see some real-life examples. Today, of course, is June 8th, and recently I celebrated the anniversary of June 6th, 1944, Normandy D-Day, which, of course, is the cover of this book. So, hey, I'm keeping it related. So, one of the tactics to this sea-to-land invasion was that when you drop guys off on a boat, like you have your transport, that's this boat here. This is a boat, okay, if you don't know. And it goes out, and then the front falls open, and you just run out. Now, there's a tactic behind that, which is there's only one way to go. The ocean's behind you, you can't retreat, and there's one way out of here, okay, unless you try to fall over the sides. But something that the troops at Normandy, were mentioned, some of the survivors, was that when the transport comes up to the beach, okay, the Germans who are in their bunkers up there with their Spandaus shoot down, and they ding, just the front to make sure they're aiming right, so that they've got pre-sighted guns, and when pre-sighted guns, not this, because it's a Spandau. Anyway, so that when the transport front opens, they just start shooting into basically the tunnel of guys, and I don't know how you just stand in the front behind that door and wait for it to open. That's just insane to me. But one of the reasons why the invasion of Normandy worked was because when they pushed, when the Americans and the British and I believe Canadians, well done allies, pushed their guys onto the beach, they couldn't retreat. They had to go forward. The only way to get out of that was to keep going. So Hector kind of makes a mistake here by not letting his enemy have a way out. According to Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War, if you do that to guys, if you put them in a place where there's no way out, each one will kill like 10 guys, on average, apparently. And he wrote the book on war, so I'm gonna say that's right. But they fight like so much harder because there's no way out. So Sun Tzu, when he was doing battles, would intentionally make sure there was a way for his enemy to retreat, which also kind of makes sense in another way, because usually the point of a battle isn't to kill everybody, it's to win the battle, which can mean they surrender, or they run away. It's that's plenty of ways to do it. Now, this tactic is actually intentionally used today. I'm using examples here. I'm not mixing politics with my entertainment channel, especially since there's like 6 of you here. But so riot police or crowd control police or whatever you want to call them, when they're doing their job right, the way that they the tactics that they are trained to use employs the same idea, because their goal is to get people to leave an area. That's the point. They're breaking up a riot. They don't even arrest a lot of people a lot of the time. If you look at what happened in Charlottesville, only 8 people were arrested. Okay, and that's partially because there's not that many riot police. It looks like a lot because they're all moving the same way, which is another thing that especially ancient world soldiers would do. But the way that they're supposed to work, the way riot police is supposed to work, is that they have a way planned out for people to leave. So if riot police completely surround a group of protesters or rioters or whatever, they're doing their job wrong, because that's not what they're trained to do. They're trained to let people get out. So Hector, his enthusiasm, we saw in the earlier books, there's an eagle, there's all these omens. They're like, hey, back off, man, this isn't gonna work. And his enthusiasm, he's just like, I'm going to kill all of them. They came to my city and I'm going to kill them. And it blows up in his face and the tide is turned. So I think it's interesting that, like, this is an example of how Iliad has sort of eternal truths in it. It's like, hey, this is actually kind of how battle works, So I think that's cool. But anyhow, we've got let's see. So I think this book has everything. We've got a special we've got war, we've got romance, we've got adultery, we've got sort of assassinations going on, we've got undercover operative stuff, we got sex scenes, we've got all kinds of wonderful stuff. And I think there's some I think it's really, it says a lot about Zeus. It really says a lot about Zeus that when Hera shows up to not seduce him, and then she's like, okay, I don't want to sleep with him though, so just put him to sleep immediately. It's like, I'll lure him back to our room, and then you sleep, and then you get him, but he's like, no, now. And but it really says something about Zeus. I think this sums up Zeus better than any other thing I've heard, which is when Hera shows up and he's like, wow, you're hot. You're more hot than this person I had sex with, or this person, and this person I had a son with, and this person, and this person, ooh, yeah, her legs were great, and this person, and, yeah, she really, and this person. It's like, dude, shut up. Like, how, like, insensitive can you possibly be? It's like, you're making out and you say, like, wow, you're like one of the top 5 hottest girls I've ever kissed. It's like, good job, man. Anyway, so we get this scene where Hera's like getting all dressed up, and it's like the stuff where like she's doing stuff to her hair and stuff, like we might think like, oh, okay, she's getting her hair done. This isn't just logistics. That's the scene in the movie where we get the close up on the lips where the girl goes like, and stuff, and it's like, I'm gonna get him, that's that scene. Diomedes, once again, taking the lead. He's like, listen, guys, I know I'm younger than all y'all, but guess what? I've got the best idea. And they're like, let's go with him. Aphrodite, also with her subtle, mean girl comment when she's like, how could I or would I refuse someone who sleeps in the arms of Almighty Zeus? It's like, that's really a horrible thing to say. That's really mean, because she's like, as we see in this same book, we point out that, like, yeah, everybody has. She's like, oh yeah, your husband's not faithful to. She's just she's just mean. And of course she's mean because she is mad at Hera, but she doesn't want to totally defy her. Be like, yeah, I know we got this gripe going on, but yeah, what do you need? And it's like, oh, she needs my help, I guess. There's a lot of bitchy things going on. I'm just saying. So That's how it goes. And of course, Zeus isn't doing too good representing the fellas. But yeah, this book's full of horrible people. No, there's some good guys too. Anyway, so that's pretty much it for the commentary and analysis. But I wanted to take this chance to do something a little special for y'all. I kind of mentioned before, I sort of teased I might do this at some point. But I have, if you're listening, this would be a good time for you to pull your screen up, not just because of my face, but because 3, 2, 1, kaping! Look at that! Ah, it's a map! Isn't this lovely? Yes, so we've heard about all these cool places and all these different people, and I'm just gonna kind of quickly go through this. Like, if you want later in the episode, you can pause this and kind of look at it more, but we're gonna kind of move from left to right here. So obviously we've got the big peninsula, well, in this image, big peninsula of Greece, we've got the date here. You can see in the bottom right, we've got sort of a measurement. Now, why did I put it at 150 miles instead of just 100 miles or something like that? Well, I will tell you, gentle listener, because the way that I had to do this, I was a little cramped for time, I'll be honest, and I went onto Google Maps and I measured the distance of Crete, which is that island to just the upper left of the 150-mile marker, and Crete is about 150 miles across, and so I used that as a reference point for this so that when I made this thing later, I could just, relatively speaking, measure the distance properly. So that's why I did that. Now, we've got Greece. Now, to the right of the word Greece, we have Mount Olympus, which, of course, we spend a lot of time on in this book. And so it's across the sea. You'll see, I just want to, if you draw a line from Mount Olympus straight to the right, you will see Troy, which is, I think, interesting spacing here. Now, if we go back to Mount Olympus here, so move left, we're going to go down to the names. We've got Ithaca, which is that island on the total opposite side of Greece from where Troy is, which is where Odysseus is from. That's one reason why he has a Texas accent, because he's out west. Moving down, we've got Pylos and Argos and Sparta and Mycenae. And you can kind of see where the different people are from. Continuing over to the right, we have Salamis with Greater Ajax. Going right, obviously, you can see we have Crete where Idomeneus is from. But going up, there's Athens. Now, we haven't really mentioned Athens much, but it's a famous city today, so that's why that's there. Aulis is where Iphigenia was sacrificed. That's Agamemnon's daughter, if you remember. So that's where everybody was stationed, right? For the most part, when the big fleet of 1,000 ships got together for that episode that I'm still planning on doing. And we went from there all the way to the right. It looks like about 250 miles from Aulis to Troy. Now, and then going up, you can see where Thea is up north. Now, now, that's where Thea is. Achilles, I read at one point, was raised not so much in Thea, but also at one point on an island between Thea and Troy. But when I went to look that up again, I couldn't find it yet, so I'll have to keep checking that out. Now, so that's a cool thing about Achilles there, I guess. So now let's look at Troy, of course, where Hector, Priam, Andromache, and Paris at the bottom of that because he's the worst in that box. So, and then we have Mount Ida, which is just a little southeast or south of Troy. I put that there because that's where we keep hearing Zeus is looking down at Troy and all the rest of it. So there's a red arrow there and some red dots going to the Black Sea. Now, this is one of the things that's really important. I had mentioned before that Agamemnon had possibly been interested in taking Troy beforehand because several people have sacked Troy throughout time, including, as we heard in this book, Hercules or Heracles, depending on, how, if you went to primary school, I suppose. So, let's see here. The arrow and dots there are to show, like, Troy guards this pass and this canal, this whatever you want to call it, this way into the Black Sea. And there's a lot of groups of people who live around the Black Sea. And that's where a lot of goods that Greece gets came from. And so that was a very important trade route for a very long time. It probably still is today. Also, around the Black Sea is where a lot of the warrior women that perhaps the Amazons were based on are supposed to be, according to some archaeological digs, which have found some warrior women tombs in the last 10, 20 years or so, which is terribly exciting for probably anyone who has watched this much of this show. So, anyhow, that's the map. I hope you enjoy it. That kind of gives you an idea of, Greece going over to Troy, and Troy is sort of like the guard of this pass, because anyone who goes through that little waterway there up to the Black Sea, guess who they have to pay? Boom, Troy. Lots of money, lots of wealth, lots of goods and things, and then you've got anything that you're going to get from the East or Asia or whatever is going through the Black Sea, pretty much, if you want to get it in Greece too. So, anyhow, that is that one. Now, I think that's enough of that analysis stuff and thingamies. I'm going to go now into the chat, one of my favorite parts of this show. So, let us go in here. So, all right, Gorham Darth Cal says, woot! Awesome. Gorham Darth Cal also says, supple. Seems like a strange description for feet. Yes, I forgot to mention, there is a good chance, you heard it here first, folks. Homer was probably into feet, or at least knew that a big portion of his audience might be. It's like oiled, supple feet. So, there you go. Let's see. Gorham Darth Cal said, sleep is making me sleepy. Oh my gosh, he must be real. So, Benji the Koi Boy says, I hear the sexy episode. I'm just waiting for Nathan Fillion to come out of a pool. Ah, nice inside joke there, Benji the Koi Boy. There is a video on YouTube by a group called Britannic, which I have a video called like Pool Party or Sexy Pool or something. It's funny. You should check it out. It's a good video. Very hilarious. So, let's see, the rest of the comments are just by Gorham Darth Cal, so we're going to go on with those and then wrap it up. So, Gorham Darth Cal, first comment is, it's a good thing Zeus has god powers because his sexy talk is kind of lacking. Yeah, I guess his game is, he's just like, let's make love, let's go to bed right now. It's like, yeah, alright, well, fine. Next comment by Gorham. It says, yes to Nathan Fillion. Yes, Nathan Fillion is great. That's a hell of a throw, says Gorham Darth Cal. I'm guessing in reference to Ajax throwing the spear, someone's spear probably, or the rock, if that was, yeah, the rock. Alright, and Gorham Darth Cal finishes up by saying, desperation is a hell of a motivator, and isn't it just? Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this, special, sexy episode presented by Peter, presenting Iliad. And I hope you're staying safe and healthy out there, and you enjoyed a nice drink, and I thank you for spending this time with me, and together, alone perhaps, in this quarantine, and I hope that, you find a way. Although I'm leaving you now, until next Thursday, this Thursday, I hope until this Thursday, you find a way to just be satisfied until you come back for episode 15 of Peter Presents Iliad, with me, Peter, who's presenting Iliad. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and have a better night.